Fire aboard a ship at sea is the oldest nightmare in naval warfare. A ship cannot pull over. It cannot evacuate to the parking lot. There is no fire department arriving in 8 minutes with a ladder truck. The nearest help is hours or days away. And on a nuclear aircraft carrier carrying 5,000 people, 5 million gallons of fuel, and live ordnance in every magazine, a fire that is not controlled in minutes can become a catastrophe that destroys the ship. So who fights the fire? Not a specialized team, not a dedicated firefighting unit. Everyone. The cook, the electrician, the mail clerk, the pilot, the surgeon. Every single person aboard a nuclear aircraft carrier is a trained firefighter. And on the worst day of a deployment, any one of them may be the person who saves the ship. A nuclear aircraft carrier contains more flammable material per square foot than almost any structure on Earth. Millions of gallons of JP-5 jet fuel are stored in tanks distributed throughout the hull. Ordnance magazines hold thousands of bombs, missiles, and ammunition. Hydraulic fluid runs through miles of piping at extreme pressure. Electrical systems generate enough power to supply a small city, and all of it is enclosed in a steel hull where heat has nowhere to escape and smoke has nowhere to go. On land, a building fire is dangerous because it can collapse. At sea, a ship fire is dangerous because the building cannot be abandoned. You cannot open a window. You cannot run outside. The smoke fills the passageways. The heat warps the steel. And the only way to survive is to fight the fire from inside the very structure that is burning. The Navy learned this lesson the hardest way possible. Not once, not twice, multiple times across decades. And each disaster taught the fleet something that is now built into every procedure, every drill, and every sailor's training. The lesson is simple, and it is absolute. Every sailor is a firefighter, no exceptions. This rule did not exist before July 29, 1967. Before that day, firefighting on an aircraft carrier was primarily the responsibility of specialized damage control teams, trained sailors, assigned to specific repair lockers throughout the ship, who would respond when a fire was reported. Then the Forrestal burned. A Zuni rocket fired accidentally across the flight deck of the USS Forrestal in the Gulf of Tonkin. It struck a fuel tank. Jet fuel poured across the deck, and within 90 seconds, bombs began to detonate. The first explosion killed most of the primary firefighting team. The sailors who were specifically trained to fight the fire were dead before the fire had fully started. And the remaining crew, sailors whose training did not include advanced firefighting, were left staring at a burning flight deck with no idea what to do. 134 sailors died. 161 were injured. The Navy investigated, and the conclusion was devastating in its simplicity. If the trained team dies first, the ship dies with it, unless everyone else can do the job. After Forrestal, the Navy mandated that every sailor, regardless of rate, rank, or assignment, would receive firefighting and damage control training. Not a brief lecture, not a safety video, hands-on training with hoses, foam, breathing apparatus, and simulated fires in controlled environments. Boot camp includes damage control fundamentals. Every ship conducts regular fire drills. Every sailor qualifies on the firefighting equipment assigned to their section of the ship. And every carrier deployment includes general quarters drills where the entire crew responds to simulated emergencies as if they were real. The principle is built into the culture now. The fire does not care about your rate. It does not care if you are a pilot, a cook, or a hospital corpsman. It does not care about your rank. When the alarm sounds, you are a firefighter, and your job is to save the ship. But knowing the principle is not enough. Fighting a fire aboard a carrier requires equipment, organization, and a system that can respond faster than the fire can spread. And that system is distributed throughout the ship in spaces that most people aboard never think about until the worst day of their lives. Scattered throughout an aircraft carrier are compartments called repair lockers. These are the nerve centers of damage control. Each one is assigned to a specific zone of the ship, and each one contains the equipment needed to fight fire, stop flooding, and repair structural damage within that zone. Inside a repair locker, you will find fire hoses, nozzles, and fittings, portable fire extinguishers, aqueous film forming foam, AFFF, a chemical agent designed specifically to suppress fuel fires by creating a film that floats on top of burning liquid and smothers the flame. Oxygen breathing apparatus for working in smoke-filled spaces. Pipe patching kits for sealing broken water lines. Shoring materials, wooden beams, and steel supports for bracing weakened bulkheads. Portable pumps for removing floodwater. And manning each repair locker is a team of sailors, often led by a junior officer or senior enlisted member, whose primary job aboard the ship may have nothing to do with damage control. The team leader might be an electronics technician. The nozzle operator might be a culinary specialist. The boundary setter might be a yeoman. It does not matter. When General Quarters sounds, every member of the repair party goes to their locker, puts on their gear, and prepares to respond. The organization is deliberate. Instead of relying on a single, centralized firefighting team that must travel through the ship to reach the fire, the Navy distributes response capability throughout the vessel. The fire is fought by the team closest to it. Backup teams set boundaries, using closed hatches, sealed ventilation ducts, and charged hoses to prevent the fire from spreading to adjacent compartments. Coordinating all of this is Damage Control Central, a command post deep inside the ship where the damage control assistant monitors the ship's stability, tracks the location and severity of casualties, and directs repair teams to where they are needed most. On July 12, 2020, the amphibious assault ship USS Bonhomme Richard caught fire. It was not at sea. It was not in combat. It was pierside in San Diego, undergoing maintenance. And it burned for 4 days. The fire started in the ship's lower vehicle storage area. The initial cause was later determined to be arson. A sailor set the fire deliberately. But the cause of the fire is only part of the story. The real failure was what happened after the fire started. The ship's fire suppression systems had been partially disabled during maintenance. Fire boundaries that should have contained the blaze to a single compartment were compromised. Combustible materials were stored improperly, and the initial response was slow, disorganized, and hampered by communication failures. The fire spread through the ship for 4 days. Temperatures inside the hull exceeded 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. The superstructure partially collapsed. The flight deck warped. 63 sailors and civilians were injured. The Navy ultimately decided that repairing the ship was too expensive. The Bonhomme Richard, a 40,000-ton warship that had served for over 2 decades, was decommissioned and sold for scrapping. A $2 billion asset lost. Not at sea, not in combat, in port, during maintenance. The Bonhomme Richard fire was a shock to the Navy, not because of the arson, but because it revealed how many layers of defense had failed simultaneously. Fire suppression offline, fire boundaries incomplete, initial response slow, equipment not maintained, communication inadequate. Every one of those failures had been individually addressed in doctrine and procedure. But doctrine that is not practiced is not doctrine. Procedure that is not enforced is not procedure. And the Bonhomme Richard proved that a warship is only as survivable as the discipline of the people who maintain it. But the most important lesson was the one the Navy already knew and had to relearn. Damage control is not a system. It is a culture. And cultures die when people stop taking them seriously. Here is what a fire aboard a nuclear aircraft carrier actually sounds like. It starts with an alarm, a specific tone that every sailor aboard has been trained to recognize instantly. Then the announcement over the ship's general announcing system. Fire, location, class of fire, and then every light in the ship switches to red battle lighting. The passageways go dark. Not completely dark, but red lit, shadowed, and disorienting. Sailors are moving in every direction. Some are heading toward their repair lockers. Some are heading toward their battle stations. Some are sealing hatches behind them, setting boundaries that will contain the fire, even if it means isolating themselves from the rest of the ship. The temperature rises. Smoke begins to fill the passageways nearest the fire. Visibility drops. The breathing apparatus goes on. And the world narrows to the sound of your own breathing and the voices on the damage control communication circuit. And somewhere in the ship, a team of sailors who are not professional firefighters is advancing toward a fire they cannot yet see, carrying hoses and foam applicators, wearing gear that protects them from heat but not from fear. The crew of a nuclear aircraft carrier practices this constantly. General quarters drills happen regularly throughout a deployment. Fire drills are conducted without warning. Repair locker teams are evaluated, critiqued, and retrained. The skills are rehearsed until they become automatic. Because in the first minutes of a real fire, there is no time to remember training. There is only time to execute it. And the reason for all of this, the reason the Navy invests more time in damage control training than almost any other shipboard skill, is a truth that the Forrestal taught in 1967 and the Bonhomme Richard confirmed in 2020. The ship does not save the crew saves the ship. A nuclear aircraft carrier is the most advanced warship ever built. It has the most sophisticated sensors, the most powerful weapons, and the most complex engineering systems afloat. But none of that technology can fight a fire. None of it can seal a flooded compartment. None of it can patch a broken pipe or shore a failing bulkhead. Only people can do that. And on a carrier, every person is trained to do it, because the alternative is losing the ship. 5,000 people, 5 million gallons of fuel, live ordnance in every magazine, and one rule that has been written, rewritten, and paid for in the lives of sailors across 6 decades. Every sailor is a firefighter. The cook who feeds 5,000 people 3 times a day knows how to operate a fire hose. The aviation mechanic who maintains fighter jets knows how to set fire boundaries. The hospital corpsman who treats injuries knows how to use a breathing apparatus in zero visibility smoke. They train for the emergency they hope never comes. And when it comes, they respond not because they are specialists, but because the culture they belong to demands it. That is damage control. Not a system, a culture. And the most important culture aboard a warship. If you think that story matters, consider subscribing. We cover the things that keep a warship alive, not just the weapons that make it dangerous. Drop a comment and tell us. Which detail surprised you most? The Forrestal fire that killed the trained team in 90 seconds and changed every rule? The Bonhomme Richard that burned for 4 days in port and was scrapped? The repair locker manned by a cook, an electrician, and a yeoman? Or the fact that a $2 billion warship was lost not in combat but during maintenance? And a question for our next video. You have seen how a carrier fights fire, but there is a ship that carries no weapons, launches no aircraft, and yet the entire carrier battle group cannot operate without it. The supply ship, the invisible logistics backbone that keeps 5,000 people fed, fueled, and armed for months. Without it, the most powerful warship on Earth runs out of food in 3 weeks. That story is coming next.